Okay, today we're going to look at solving rational equations algebraically, and then tomorrow we will look at solving them graphically. So the first thing that we want to do to solve them algebraically is to find the least common denominator. Then we want to multiply both sides of the equation by the least common denominator. This will eliminate the denominator, so we're left with just a regular equation. And then we're going to, if necessary, we will eliminate extraneous answers, which I will talk about later. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is ask the question, what numbers can x not be? Remember, we can't have 0 in the denominator. So anything that makes the denominator 0 is illegal. So in this equation, x cannot equal to 0. Let's just put that on the side. X cannot equal to 0. Let's hold on to that thought, because we may not need it. Now, this says find the least common denominator. So this is how I find the least common denominator. I said that 3 is 3 times 1. 6 is 3 times 2 times 1. Notice how each factor is getting its own column. And the least common denominator and the factors of x are simply x. So for what I do is I multiply each of these columns together, and that gives me the least common denominator, which in this case would be 6x. 3 times 2 times 1 times x. So my least common denominator is 6x. Once I have that understood, I am going to multiply each term by 6 over x. So this is 2 times 6x over 3 plus 5 over 6 times 6x. And that's 1 over x times 6x. Now the reason I have to do that is because if I'm essentially, when I multiply on one side, I have to multiply on the other side. So if I simplify this, I get 12x over 3, which is 4x. Here the 6's cancel out, and so I am left with 5x. Here the x's cancel out, and I am left with just 6. So once I'm at this point, I am just solving a regular equation. So how do I solve this? 4x plus 5x is 10x, which is equal to 6. Divide by 10. X is equal to 6/10, or we could say 3/5. Okay? Alrighty? So we find the least common denominator, and then we multiply everything by that least common denominator. So we have 5 and 4. Some of you can look at that and say, well, the least common denominator is 20, but I'll just do it the way I did it before. I got 5 and 1. I got 4 times 1, and this is 1, so that's all I got. So when I multiply my 3 columns together, I get 20. All right, so I'm going to multiply every expression by 20. So I get y minus 2 over 5 minus y minus 4 over 4 is equal to negative 2. And I did that so I can show you, I thought about it as I was doing the other one. I can show you that I'm multiplying by the least common denominator. Okay, so when I multiply by the least common denominator, the 5 and the 20 becomes 4. So now I have 4y minus 8, distributing that 4 to everyone. Minus, when I multiply by, divide that into 4, I get 5. So I got minus 5y minus 25. And that's equal to negative 40. So once again, notice I put this in parentheses. Those parentheses are important because I'm going to have to distribute that negative in a minute. So I have 4y minus 8 minus 5y plus 25 equals negative 40. Combining like terms, I get negative y and 25 minus 8 is 17, I think. And then I subtract 17 from both sides. So I get negative y is equal to negative 57 So y is equal to 57. Okie dokie? Alrighty. So once again, any whole number can be written over 1. So what's my least common denominator? Well, this is kind of easy since I only have 1. My least common denominator is x. So multiplying every term by x by the least common denominator okay? Here, the x's cancel, so I'm left with just 6. This becomes x squared, and this is 5x. So this is a quadratic equation. So how do I solve a quadratic equation? I set it equal to 0, so I'm going to bring the 5x over, make it 6, and then I have to factor. I get x minus 2, x minus 3. So my possible answers are x equals 2 and x equals 3. We haven't talked much about extraneous answer, but an extraneous answer would have been if I had gotten x equals 0 here, because x is in the denominator. It cannot equal to 0. We're going to get one in a minute. I'm not sure. So again, we're going to factor this because we always like to factor. Factor is our favorite F word this unit. Okay, so what's my least common denominator? Well, x plus 5 has x plus 5, doesn't have anything else. So x minus 5 would go here because it's different than x plus 5. And then this last term has an x plus 5 and it has an x minus 5. So we multiply those columns together to get our least common denominator. Okay? So that's what I'm going to multiply by everything. So I have 2 x plus 5 plus 1 x minus 5 is equal to 16 x plus 5 x minus 5. And then I'm going to multiply by the least common denominator, which is x plus 5 x minus 5. Okay, so when I do that, what happens to some of my expressions? Well, this x plus 5 cancels with that x plus 5, so I'm left with x minus 5. Multiplying that by 2, I get 2x minus 10. Again, this cancels. X minus 5 cancels here. I multiply by 1, I get x plus 5. And look over here, everything cancels. That x plus 5 cancels, x minus 5 cancels, so I'm left with 16. Sorry, I don't have corona. All right, so adding these together, I get 3x, and then minus 10 plus 5 is minus 5, and that's going to equal to 16. Now we're back to just a two-step equation. I add 5 to both sides. I get 3x is equal to 21. I divide by 3. X is equal to 7. Now, again, what were my possible extraneous answers? My possible extraneous answers was x could not equal to 5 and x could not equal to negative 5. Because if x is 5, it would have made this 0. If x was negative 5, it would make that 0. So those would have been my possible extraneous answers. I should say not equal to. And since I didn't get that anyway, I'm good. I'm golden. Okay? All right, come back and watch the next video on solving